All right. On this video, we're going to be going over GVMER's review and sort of, it's almost like a mini documentary of Dungeon Siege as a brand. It's called The Rise and Fall of Dungeon Siege. The channel does go over Dungeon Siege 2 and Space Siege, the movie In the Name of the King, and whatnot. I don't intend on going too far into this video. We're probably gonna get through the first game, see what is said about the game and whatnot, and then we're probably gonna be stopping right here, about a little under halfway through the video, just to separate the Dungeon Siege 1 portions of the video and the commentary from the rest, because whereas like Dungeon Siege 2 and whatnot, like I may make a future video on it, and I might include some commentary here and there that refers to it. I'm not, the point of looking at other reviewers is to see what are they saying about Dungeon Siege 1. It isn't about, oh, what are they saying about all of these games. If we ever round the corner and we do get to Dungeon Siege 2 and we do go over those games, that'll be a time where I might come back to this video and be like, okay, what did you say about Dungeon Siege 2 and Broken World, the expansion that I can see here for Dungeon Siege 2. And it looked like a little bit of Throne of Agony right there, look at that. But without further ado, let's just hop right into it.
In the realm of action-oriented video games, few are as zen as dungeon crawlers. Even at their most complex, demolishing and looting enemies in the likes of Diablo or Torchlight is as hypnotic as it is satisfying, their gameplay loops providing a perfect mixture of habitual repetition and utter excitement. And to a small yet passionate subset of PC gamers during the early 2000s, few games offered a better blend of these elements than Dungeon Siege. Created by Gas-Powered Games, a Redmond-based development studio led by the legendary Chris Taylor, Dungeon Siege received significant praise upon its release in 2002 for its unique, party-based gameplay and its seamless, loading screen-free world, resulting in a dedicated...
So we're getting into some of the standard talking points here. I'm going to start this at 0:45. Standard points about Dungeon Siege. So this would be levelless design, party-based gameplay. I'm not going to speak too much to what he's saying about like ARPGs or RPG games at the time being like a niche group. I don't think that is the case, but I can't really verify that. It seems like with titles like Neverwinter Nights and Baldur's Gate and Morrowind, that there was definitely even Fallout, Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, there was quite a substantial market and quite a substantial group there, you know, that people were looking for these games. So I don't know if it was as niche as he's saying.
player base quickly rallying around its design. Yet even amongst its most ardent fans, it also received significant criticism for its bare-bones story, as well as its tendency to play itself. As a result, its creators worked hard to ensure its sequel featured a more impressive narrative and a deeper, more involving combat system upon its release in 2005. The end result of their efforts wouldn't upend its genre, but it would still prove a hit among fans and continue to inch the series closer to role-playing stardom. Unfortunately, after the release of a decent...
Yeah, this is... when the Dungeon Siege 2 video comes out, or, well, after we finish this video and going into research for Dungeon Siege 2, that's the only place that I could really verify a claim like that, of, like, role-playing stardom, because this game, Dungeon Siege 1, does not reach the heights of like Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights, or like the Elder Scrolls, because Elder Scrolls Morrowind, you know, but it was still at its time, it was still like known and renowned. It was positively received, and it was put on a similar level as those games when they were like for different rewards, like dice awards. They put them on a similar like level of like, oh, what's the best computer role playing game of the year 2020, or of the year 2002. And even Dungeon Siege's expansion, Legends of Arana, actually was put on the list for 2003, I'm pretty sure. So, it was in the conversation. It was not like a backwater game that was sort of just like made and forgotten instantly. It was like people, like, it was a name that was being discussed and was in circulation, even with the bigger names. So I don't know how Dungeon Siege 2 compared to Dungeon Siege 1 with its release and reception and the numbers that it pulled, but I do know Dungeon Siege 1 was very successful and was well known at the time,
Albeit gimped spin-off on the PlayStation Portable the following year, the series would proceed to go dormant for half a decade, in addition to being adapted into one of the worst video game movies to ever reach theaters. When it would finally reemerge, it would do so under the guidance of a different studio and end up being utterly unlike what had come before it. This is the rise and fall.
Yeah, I think this is in reference to I think Obsidian actually was the one who did a crack at Dungeon Siege 3. And it's really funny when you think about it, because it's just like, what has Obsidian done? It's just like, oh, okay, they did Fallout New Vegas, and probably the best Fallout since Bethesda made the purchased the IP. Obsidian had got their hands on they worked on Pillars of Eternity, which was pretty big, PoE and PoE 2. A lot of the people that worked at Obsidian had worked on the original Fallout teams, or like there were definitely a few developers that worked on the original Fallout teams. So like Obsidian, it's like really interesting to see like how it's really interesting to see how like Dungeon Siege 3, which is like known to be like not a Dungeon Siege game by people that like Dungeon Siege 1 and 2, how they sort of like flopped. I think in one of his interviews, Chris Taylor, like the lead developer, CEO of Gas Powered Games, he said he like described Dungeon Siege 3 as like the peanut butter being spread too thin, where it's like you eat the bread and you don't taste any of the peanut butter. It was a really weird analogy. He probably had Lord of the Rings on the mind or something, but it's definitely known even by Chris Taylor just to be like, yeah, that game was not it. It was not it, Chief. So interesting little tidbit there.
Of Dungeon Siege.
Respect the animation here.
Like so many other video game series, Dungeon Siege was created by a large and talented group of individuals, all of whom believed fully in its potential and contributed steadfastly to its development throughout the years it was active. Yet among this group,
I'm curious when he says large, because I guess I might need to look into other dev teams at the time, but like Dungeon Siege 1, all right, so large dev team. Dungeon Siege 1 had a dev team of like, it started with 30 people and then moved up to 40 people. Now, that could totally be large, but like I'm just thinking about dev teams today, which granted the industry itself has developed a lot and like there's a lot more money behind it now, but it's just like there are studios that are like in different countries or like in different parts of a single country, like Bethesda is like the first thing to come to mind, where it's just like, yeah, we've got like, I think we have Austin, like, or we have places in Houston or Austin, and we have Washington D.C., and then we have, or the Baltimore offers, and then we have like places in Montreal or something like that, where it's just like, yeah, you guys just have studios everywhere, like that. You just, you know, so like that's what I think of when I think of like large dev teams. But for the time, 30 to 40 might be large, but I don't know. I don't think so. But like intuitively, I don't think so.
There was one person who played a more pivotal role in its development than most: Chris Taylor. An avid video game player and designer from a young age, Taylor got his start in the industry in British Columbia, where he spent his time working on sports games for Distinctive Software in the late 80s.
Yeah, 1988, he started with Hardball 2, I believe it was. That was his first game that he developed and worked on. That's pretty sure it's in one of his interviews that I have listed, that I haven't taken full notes of, but I have like, Chris Taylor has a plethora of interviews on YouTube that you can go look up throughout the years. He is very present in regards to like in regards to like YouTube interviews and whatnot. So there is a lot of material to sift through. But yeah, no, this was his humble origins. It was funny because he said that he had to start with like, he was looking for like jobs in the newspaper or something like that for like these sorts of computer jobs, because like working at like a mainline company at the time, you had to have like proper education, in regards to like coding and what was being used at the time. So yeah, just a little bit of Chris Taylor lore there.
After this, Taylor moved to Washington State to join Cave Dog Entertainment in the mid-90s, where he and the rest of the studio staff went on to release Total Annihilation, a futuristic real-time strategy game set in the midst of a galactic war. At a time when the genre was still coming into its own, Total Annihilation wowed fans and critics alike with its fully three-dimensional units and terrain, as well as its bevy of innovative gameplay mechanics and concepts, influencing many contemporaries to follow in its footsteps and elevating its creators, almost overnight, into strategy gaming eminency. Eager to try and keep Total Annihilation's player base happy, Cave Dog's staff would proceed to tweak and add new content to it over the months that would follow its release.
This is actually an important note, because I didn't realize how much the process of, or how much Total Annihilation actually informs the development process of Dungeon Siege. Because so we have like TA modding / updates. With Dungeon Siege, that was something that Chris Taylor put to the forefront as well. It was just like, he saw how much people enjoyed tinkering with Total Annihilation and having different mods and whatnot, that he like was determined to have that same thing with Dungeon Siege. And so like there's the Dungeon Siege toolkit that you can get to like edit the game and modify the game. And there's like, the Ultima games that were made in the Dungeon Siege engine, like there's a lot of different like mods that you can find online to download in different forums or in Steam pages that you can play. And apparently that took up like 20% of the budget. That's what the Wikipedia page says. I haven't I've read the Wikipedia page of Dungeon Siege. I haven't gone through the sources of like relevant information and vetted all of them. Some of them I have, because some of them are YouTube interviews and whatnot that I've taken notes of. But apparently, in an interview, he had said that it took like 20% of the budget to make that modding kit and make it accessible to players and whatnot. Which is, yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. But he's definitely, Chris Taylor, just from his interviews, he's definitely like player first in regards to like making the game and experiences and whatnot. Like he's not focused on the money, he's focused about the play experience. He's very adamant about that.
But after completing work on the game's first expansion in 1998, many within the studio became anxious to move on from the realm of real-time strategy and try their hand at a Diablo-esque action role-playing game. They didn't yet have a name for what it would be, but they knew that they wanted it to be party-based, take place in an expansive 3D world bereft of loading screens, and innovate heavily upon the traditional role-playing game interface in order to make venturing through its locales as seamless and immersive of an experience as possible. One thing led to another, and after much deliberation, Taylor and a sizable number of Cave Dog's staff struck out on their own to establish gas-powered games and began working on what would become Dungeon Siege.
Yeah, May of 1998 was when this happened, and it was that same year that they started the development of Dungeon Siege. It was in 1998 as well. It was I'm gonna just keep referencing vague interviews until I can directly like recall like, oh yeah, this information came from like the Matt chat, or it came from like Gunfire Shrimp or something like that. But he in interviews he does talk about that process of like bringing people into GPG and beginning the process of Dungeon Siege's development.
From the get-go, the newly formed studio had lofty expectations of how quickly it would be able to complete its opus, believing that it would be able to get Dungeon Siege onto store shelves in just 2 years. Yet the longer the game's development progressed, the more it became apparent that this wasn't going to happen. In a post-mortem on Gama Sutra written shortly after Dungeon Siege's release, Bartosz Kianka of Gas Powered Games would attribute a large degree of the project's extended length to the team's extreme ambitiousness, arguing that in the long run, it caused the team as much pain as it created pleasure. Everyone within the studio desired to try and utterly outdo the competition, and this desire often translated into them conceiving brilliant original ideas.
I do know of this article. We have the Gama Sutra article. Development was too ambitious. Chris Taylor himself has said I know he said this in the Matt chat. This is Matt chat 116, where he talks about Dungeon Siege being too long, and this is something that's interesting because he says that Dungeon Siege is a 50 to 60 hour game, and it's just like, are you including the multiplayer experience? If so, then maybe it is yes. If you're talking about the single player experience, that's only like anywhere between 20 to 25 hours long. I just finished a hard playthrough and it was like 26 hours, I think. So it's, you know, I don't like there. He also does blame the stress of the game being without loading screens. Like that took a lot of time to develop and make possible, and that time could have been spent elsewhere in the game. And so even though it's like a very neat aspect of the game that there are no loading screens, that you just click forward and you just go through, that was probably a decision that cost a lot of time. And he says it cost them a lot of time. So yeah, like there's definitely some factors here that that we can point out and be like, yeah, these are probably strong reasons as to why that this took multiple years. In the making of video, actually, in the making of video for Dungeon Siege, which you can find on YouTube if you poke around long enough. The producer who was also a lead designer, I think his name is Jacob McMahon. He was the producer of the game. But he was also a lead designer, and he was the lead designer with Chris Taylor, who is the CEO of Gas Powered Games. So there you go. But he said that it took like a year and a half, or maybe a little bit more, to like make the game engine, to like get all of the art in place, get the AI set up, and to like actually like get to play and experience the game, which I think is very interesting, because it's just like, okay, in our development cycle, that process took 2 years, and so we're probably still putting, like, where does the extra 2 years come from, you know, in this development cycle? Like, what is part of that process? I know in 2000 was when they actually started looking for producers, apparently. That's in an article on Wikipedia, I'm pretty sure, that I need to go look at. But finding specifics about the development cycle of this game has been somewhat vexing, and you know, but with research and time, we'll get there.
On how to make Dungeon Siege stand apart from it. Instead of allowing the player to start out the game's single-player campaign as one of several predefined classes, for example, the team decided to make it so that players would start as a generic, classless character and gradually evolve themselves into whatever type of fighter they wanted to become by repeatedly making use of specific skills or abilities. Likewise, while trying to figure out realistic ways to let players hoard more loot when out in the field and not feel like they were battling with their inventory sizes, something that Taylor constantly found himself doing when playing Diablo, they stumbled upon the idea of having a trusty pack mule carry their excess loot. But for every pack mule that...
So this is actually impressive. This bit of information, I know, comes from an interview. This comes from another one of the Matt Chat interviews. I think it's also 116. He has a few interviews with... Because Matt Chat 115, 116, and 117 have to do with Chris Taylor. And then there's Matt Chat like 168, which is like a few years later, where Chris Taylor comes in and talks about Wild Man, a game that he was trying to get started on Kickstarter, to get like 1 million. I think it was 1.1 million for the development of the game, and I think he got halfway before he pulled it. But what I'm saying is there's a few different interviews. I don't remember which one specifically, but this was on a Matt Chat where he does say, yeah, Diablo was the gold standard, and pack mules and inventory sizes. And the loading screens of Diablo were annoying, and the inventory sizes were annoying. So it's very interesting to see how much Diablo was how much Diablo influenced the game. It's very, very, very interesting.
It made it off the drawing board and into the game. The team feature creeped a dozen more ideas that ended up being deemed unnecessary or too difficult to implement, causing the project schedule to gradually slide further and further off track. Compounding issues further was the fact that nobody on the team had ever truly made a role-playing game before, or had any experience running their own development studio. And when it came to making Dungeon Siege's world free of loading screens, there were no shortage of problems that needed to be overcome. At the 2003 Game Developers Conference, the company would detail how, in addition to tasking its engineers with crafting a uniquely powerful engine,
and I need to rehear this. Which GDC this was?
At the 2003 Game Developers Conference,
okay, so this is... I'm just noting this because this is actually a good source for me. So GDC 2003. So source.
Company would detail how, In addition to tasking its engineers with crafting a uniquely powerful engine, this loading screen-free directive forced its level designers to completely rethink their production pipeline. Unlike most other games where the buffer provided by loading screens enabled developers to stick levels next to each other without concern as to whether they flowed naturally into each other, the lack of loading between Dungeon Siege's levels meant that all of them needed to fit together seamlessly. Thus, in order to ensure that they did, the team adopted an assembly line-like approach to crafting them, where each designer worked exclusively on a specific aspect of every single level, such as its environment type, layout, or lighting, only to hand it off to the next designer for them to do their part. This way, everyone became...
I'd love to see the video footage also. Also video footage. I'd love to see and get access to the video footage of this. I imagine that somewhere in YouTube or somewhere in the Wikipedia articles that are used as sources, these videos will probably come up. I haven't seen anything on YouTube that I've looked at so far, but this is having access to like the what this footage is like. You know, it's probably like something similar to like a making of, where it like describes the development process. That would be very, very helpful.
Intimately familiar with how every level was constructed and made sure they all could be put together without issue later on. All of this resulted in Dungeon Siege's development cycle lasting 4 years instead of 2, and the staff at Gas Powered Games experiencing some of the worst crunch that they had ever inflicted upon themselves. Yet they continued to truck ahead, out of both a love for what they were making as well as each other. And
yeah, very wholesome moment. But this is 7. This is like 750. So crunch. Developer crunch, dev crunch. So yeah, different. I know there's an interview with this one is like, I think it's like Gunfire Shrimp or Shrimp Pistol or something like that, but that's the name of the YouTube channel. But it's 2 developers that worked on the Skylander games, and they had a little interview with Chris Taylor. And in that interview, I think it was like in 2021 that they did this interview or something. Might have been, no, it was in 2024. The one that I'm citing right now is from 2024. But Chris Taylor says that in the last 6 months they were pulling like 14-hour days. And that was like the standard. So it was yeah, there was definitely a lot of crunch towards the end there. I need to go back and like rewatch that, because as part of my process, it's sort of just like, okay, I look at this interview. Is there a Dungeon Siege section somewhere in the chapters? No. Okay, add it to the research thing anyways, because we'll just move it to the bottom of the list, because when I have time, I'll go and listen to it, and he might go on a tangent or something like that and bring up Dungeon Siege. Or he might give insight into how GPG was doing at the time or something like that, you know? So I'll just throw that in there. So I have gone through some of these interviews and like actually like timestamps, notes, and whatnot. I decided not to record those because these are like hour-plus long interviews, and it's like, why am I gonna record that? I'm not gonna be transforming the main content at all. So yeah, it's a long, arduous process, but yeah, it was in that interview where he says that it was 14 hours, last 6 months, very painful, yada yada.
Before anyone knew it, numerous publishers were knocking on their door, willing to help market and fund their work. In an interview with Games TM in 2015, Taylor would recall being surprised at how many outfits were interested in partnering up with them. After having their heads down in the trench so low for so long, this burst of support was hard for them to fully grasp. But in the end, they chose to go with Microsoft after the tech giant's then vice president of game publishing, Ed Fries, personally reached out to him and expressed how excited they were to expand into the PC games business. Finally, after repeated delays and an intense amount of fine-tuning, both parties managed to get Dungeon Siege out the door in April of 2002.
I just can't help but say, oh my god, I love the soundtrack so much.
Pundits almost uniformly agreed that even though it wore its love of Diablo too strongly on its sleeve to be considered revolutionary, and was fairly simple when compared to some of its genre's more tactical offerings, it still made for a very enjoyable time.
It's interesting, like, this point of criticism I think is really interesting. Wonder if this is a quote. Wore its love of Diablo too close to its skin. Something like that. That's a paraphrase. That is a paraphrase. But the game was nominated for and this is something I think is interesting, is like the game was nominated for like innovative game design in, I think, 2002. I'm pretty sure that is also on the Dungeon Siege Wikipedia page. But it's really interesting for that to be said, where it's just like, oh yeah, it's not innovative, but it's just like, well, I mean, it didn't win the award, but it was nominated. It was nominated for an innovative game in 2002. It lost to like a tank game, if I recall. I'm trying to so I have it right here. In the annual Interactive Achievement Awards, which is arranged by the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, which I think the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences does the DICE rewards, or the DICE awards, the DICE, game awards. They nominated Dungeon Siege as the outstanding innovation in computer gaming. So it lost to Battlefield 1942. That's what it was. That was the tank game that it lost to. So it's, I don't know about it like not being innovative at all, because it definitely was. It definitely was like in the middle of Diablo and Baldur's Gate in regards to it being like the way that it's like an action RPG, but also like there's got RTS elements in there, but there's also like a party manager, the way that all of these things stand up. It definitely was innovative. Again, even the levelless design is innovative. The classless design was innovative. These that's my response to that criticism. That's a
Whether done online with friends or offline with a menagerie of player-controlled characters, pillaging and looting one's way through Dungeon Siege's environments was a considerable amount of fun, with every enemy encounter flying by in a joyful heartbeat of thrashing metal and spells. Much praise was also directed at the game's user interface, which allowed one to reposition and scale most of its elements, as well as perform a variety of other forward-thinking tricks previously unseen in most other dungeon crawlers.
Yeah, it's got a lot of features that were previously unseen in other dungeon crawlers. That sounds like innovation to me.
And no complaints were had about the fact that all the while one ventured through the game's gorgeous environments, one never had to worry about encountering a single loading bar. Most people's compliments ended, however, when it came to Dungeon Siege's writing. Set within the charming but comparatively generic kingdom of Ebb, almost everyone agreed that its story was bland to the point of being forgettable, and seemed to exist solely to provide the player with an excuse as to why they were venturing through its varied locales.
Yes, so this is the story and writing of Dungeon Siege. So there is an interview with Neil Halford. I think it is a Matt Chat interview as well. But Neil Halford is the writer of Dungeon Siege, and he was brought later into the process of the game's design than he normally was. And he apparently, like, this is just what, like, a quick reading of some articles says, but apparently Chris Taylor wanted the game to be mechanics forward, and so even though Dungeon Siege does have like a really, if you like look into it, like a solid background story and explanation for what's going on, that's all that there was for the players, like this hinting at a broader story, and the like that there was a more in-depth story that was written for the developers to like help them, like when they're designing the game, to like lean into different aspects or to like inspire them in different areas. But there was even, I think, enough of a story where they were at one point talking about writing a book about Dungeon Siege and its world, which would have been very interesting to see, because the story from the player's perspective in regards to like why the player is motivated, go from this town to the next town, that aspect of the story, the very superficial one, like in your face as a player, is like the weak aspect of the story that everyone criticizes and whatnot, but they too often forget like the solid world building and like the peek behind the curtain when you just talk to NPCs in this game, or you read some of the book text in the game, and then it's just like, oh wait, there's a lot more being hinted at that's going on here, and I can actually connect some of these dots, but there's more to it, I just can't see it. And that was actually intended by Chris Taylor, which is very sad. It's a good point of criticism, I would say.
This had been partially by design, yet also partially by necessity. While few within the studio had massive storytelling ambitions from the start of its development, the complexity of the game's technology had also prevented them from being able to include as ambitious a story as they wanted once they were actually ready to start implementing it. Many also bemoaned how easy it eventually became to program one's companion characters to fight and kill on the player's behalf without needing to give further directives, with many of its critics claiming that this resulted in the game often feeling as if it was playing itself. These critiques would hit gas-powered games hard and make it begin evaluating, almost immediately, how it could address them.
I would want some like substantiation here of like these criticisms would hit gas-powered games hard. That I don't see that, or I've yet to see that, these criticisms hit gas-powered games hard. Maybe like the story, I think, is the strongest thing, because the starkest difference between DS2 and DS1 is how the player engages with the story, and how just like I'm just thinking about DS2, and like there's just like I don't know, it's like almost like sensory overload to me, whereas like DS1 doesn't have enough. DS2 is sort of just like, it's like trying too hard to be like, hey guys, we have this story here, look at all of these different cutscenes, look all of these like different little quests that we have, and oh my gosh, this epic battle between Azunai, and he used the shield of the defender or whatever, and then there was Zeramoth, who had like the sword of darkness or whatever the fuck, and like Azunai was hinted at in Dungeon Siege 1, and they didn't really like lean into it, which is one of the charming things about Dungeon Siege, because it's just like it leaves you curious about what that more is. And then Dungeon Siege 2 was just like, we're in a different area of the world, and here's just a shit ton of information about Azunai and Zeramoth, and this is like this whole like epic thing, and you're actually like reliving the tale, because you're forming the shield again. You're just like Azunai. And it's just like, oh, we're doing this like weird cyclical I am the reincarnate thing, and it was the story criticisms I could see hitting GPG hard in that way, but the mechanics, they did make skill trees and whatnot. Like, you could still start with whatever you want and then level up your character, so like you didn't like start with a predefined class, but they did make skill trees so that like you did move in a clear direction of like, hey, this is what I'm doing. I am like I'm a two-handed fighter, or I'm a thrower, or I'm whatever the hell. But I've never seen any interviews or anything where people are just like, yeah, Dungeon Siege was a flop. We like, there were like the biggest mistakes that they've talked about is like the development was too ambitious, because there was like they were trying to bite off a lot with like making level-less design and whatnot. But I haven't seen anything of them saying like, oh yeah, the mechanics of the game are bad, or the game isn't incredibly redundant. It doesn't like, or well, that's not what GVMER said, but like the gameplay gets monotonous because I set their controls to act in this way, and then I never touch anything else again. I've never seen that be carried on by any of the developers, or spoken about by any of the developers. Maybe when I start looking into DS2 more, if I like just peek behind the curtain a little bit, I'll see that in like maybe the making of Dungeon Siege 2. I could just look at that real quick to see if they have any comments, if they reflect at all on DS1, but I haven't seen any of that yet in any of the interviews. So I just don't. These criticisms hit GPG hard. I don't see that.
Yet just as hard-hitting would be its financial performance. Despite
Hang on. Okay, this is absolute John Kaepernick. This point, I know for a fact, is absolute not true. This one is bogus. This is just Cap.
Despite the studio's best efforts to make Dungeon Siege a massive hit, the game's sales wouldn't generate quite as big of a splash as its creators wanted it to.
I accidentally double-clicked there. I don't know, so game was not a financial success, not as big of a splash as devs wanted. Yeah. This one's just John Cap. The game was absolutely successful in interviews. In two different interviews, I have a clip from like a YouTube short where Chris Taylor is being interviewed, and he talks about the fact that he rejected $30 million, $24 million, and $20 million deals for Gas Power Gaming after Dungeon Siege was put out. Like, Dungeon Siege definitely put GPG on the radar, and people wanted to buy them out, and he turned down the money. In regards to sales, by 2009, the game had sold 1.7 million copies. And I think by the end of the year, the Wikipedia page will be more than willing to tell us this, but by the hang on, reception, here we go. By the end of the year, it was like the 14th best-selling game across all computer games. And by 2016, the game had, or sorry, by 2006, the game had earned $14.5 million alone. So like, or in the $14.5 million in the United States alone, I should say. So this game was definitely financially successful. I don't know why we're saying it's not. That is just completely cap. Like completely 110% cap. Completely 110 million% cap, as a matter of fact.
Disdain from critics for its story and tendency to play itself undoubtedly played a role in this underperformance, though Taylor would personally pin a large part of it on Dungeon Siege's scale in interviews after its release, expressing that had both himself and the rest of Gas-Powered Games attempted to rein in Dungeon Siege's design and make it smaller and more concentrated, instead of trying to compete with its genre's most expansive titles, more players may have been motivated to check it out.
I would love for you to pull up the interview where he says that, because I've seen interviews where he's talked about this, and he talks about it strictly from like a development standpoint. Insofar as like, yeah, this wouldn't take as much time and resources. You know, we would have had more time and resources elsewhere. There would have been a lot less strain here. We wouldn't be pulling 14-hour days in the last 6 months. I'm just really confused as to like this sort of framing of Dungeon Siege not being commercially successful. It definitely was commercially successful. It wasn't like, it's not like Elder Scrolls Morrowind or anything like that. It wasn't, I don't think it was that crazy, you know, of like a big boom, but it was still like successful. For sure.
Despite shooting for the stars, Dungeon Siege was far from a Diablo killer, but it was still a great game and a solid foundation for what was to come.
I will be avenged.
Like many of its dungeon-crawling contemporaries, Dungeon Siege was followed by an expansion pack after its release. Titled Legends of Arana, the expansion came courtesy of Mad Dog Software, a New England-based developer that had previously worked on real-time strategy games such as Star Trek Armada 1 and 2, as well as Empire Earth: The Art of Conquest. Speaking to GameSpy ahead of the expansion's launch, Taylor would explain how he considered Mad Dog founder Ian Davis to be one of his most trusted friends, and that after deciding to forego making Legends of Arana themselves, both he and the rest of Gas-Powered Games agreed that Davis's team would be best suited to develop it in their place. When Legends of Arana arrived in November of 2000,
I'm rather... The rolling of the R's is getting to me. It literally sounds like he's like cutting himself out and saying like, he's like Legends of Arana, and he like cuts out that sound snippet and like puts it in just so, like he could have the R roll. But geez, I'm sorry, I couldn't hold that in. Yeah, the main development team, the GPG, went and started to develop Dungeon Siege 2 while Legends of Arana was being developed. And like there's also Yesterhaven, which was developed by the GPG team, and I think that was over the course of 6 weeks. They developed like that little mod expansion. And there's also Return to Arhawk, which was like also like a very short development cycle, to throw that out.
2003, however, many were divided on the quality of Mad Dog's work. With a lengthy story set shortly after the events of the base game, a variety of new tweaks and improvements to its mechanics, and an assortment of new weapons and features for players to take advantage of in the midst of battle, there was little argument that it was lacking in original content or value, as each copy of the expansion also came packaged with a full version of the original Dungeon Siege. But after spending dozens upon dozens of hours exploring every nook and cranny stowed inside gas-powered game's original title, and a year and a half waiting for the expansion to arrive, most gamers who had already played the original Dungeon Siege wanted something a little more revolutionary. They wanted something that would address the base game's most...
I do think that in 2003, Legends of Arana was also nominated for Computer Role-Playing Game of the Year. It lost to Coder, Knights of the Old Republic, which, I mean, fair enough. But, I mean, when I look at Legends of Arana, I'm like, yeah, there's, like, new creatures and whatnot, and, like, they do mechanical updates to the game, and, like, they make more armor, and they make item sets. Like, there are good things that they do innovate with and like move forward in the game, but it is the story aspect of it is also just very, very weak. It is not as strong. They do flesh out, they do, like, I don't know, in some places there's a little bit more because, like, you know, you have individual characters and there is like some voice acting, and like these characters do have like their own motivations, so like there is some stuff, but like the main narrative of the Shadow Jumper and, oh, as it turns out, this magical staff is missing, just like in the base game, and this evil guy wants to use the magical staff for his nefarious purposes, which is a bit it is definitely reductive of both of the storylines, but it's just like, okay, the MacGuffin here is a fucking staff that's been missing, or that has been taken, and now we are literally rehashing the concept of like, oh, we have to go and get the staff and recover the staff, and you know, we could have been a little bit more unique there.
Glowing problems with rigor in an attempt to offer a significantly better experience. And while some felt that Legends of Arana provided this, a fair few did not. Nonetheless, Mad Dog's expansion helped keep its series nested in both the CD players of many a gamer and the public consciousness of the industry as a whole, while gas-powered games figured out how to carry it forward. Even though the studio remained incredibly proud of what it had managed to accomplish with the original Dungeon Siege, its staff knew that if they wanted the role-playing game sequel to shatter its sales records, they would need to thoroughly address all of the issues that players had taken with it.
Hang on, wait, so the developers were very proud of the game, yet the criticisms and everything hit them hard. These aren't technically mutually exclusive, but I don't know. I definitely do get the vibe of them being more proud of the work that they put into it, rather than them taking like these criticisms being like devastating and it reflecting in them not having good financial success, which by the way, they were very financially successful. Like it's, you know, it's a bit messed up. If we're gonna cite anything as to the reason why GPG might not have been as financially successful as they could have, that was due to like the royalty model that that was going on. Like they didn't get royalties from the game. And that is from an interview. That is a Matt chat. That I think that's Matt chat 168. I could be wrong on the number, but Chris Taylor does say that he did not get royalty for any of the game. Like at a certain point, he didn't get royalty for any of the games that sold 1 million copies. And Dungeon Siege sold 1.7 million by 2009. So like, it definitely hit that million number, and they did not get royalties, which like it does suck. You know, like they should, like, it would have been nice for GPG to get that money. But that doesn't mean that the game was financially unsuccessful. You know, like it was definitely successful. And I don't know, not as big of a splash as Devils wanted. I don't know where. I would like to see citations of that because I haven't seen that yet. I just started. Yeah, because developers were proud of DS1.
Another half step was out of the question. They needed to provide...
Hang on. Oh my goodness. Wait a minute. What?
...shatter its sales records. They would need to thoroughly address all of the issues that players had taken with it. Another half step was out of the question.
I think we're referring to Legends of Arana as a half step, which it's just like it's a game expansion. Like I don't know if I think about like DLCs today. It's like I don't expect the DLC to like revolutionize how I play the game. You know, it might add a system or two, which um that is what Legends of Arana did. Was it added like the item set system, and it added backpacks, it added new races that you could play, or well, that you could get into your party. It added like NPC side quests. You know, it literally changed the mathematics of how the game calculates damage and whatnot. So there's a lot. There's a few changes there, you know, but like I don't expect it to just be like, hey, this expansion is a new game, or I expect it to, you know. So I wouldn't. I'm not calling it a half step. Legends of Arana as a half step. It's just like no, it's not. It's not a step at all. Like a half step would be like Dungeon Siege, Throne of Agony. That game is like a half step, you know, or Dungeon Siege 3. That was a complete misstep, you know. But comparing an expansion to like an actual full-on game release is just wild, and calling it a half step is just wild.
They needed to provide their fans with a game that would wear its respect for their critical input as if it were a badge of honor. As a result, from the moment they began working in full force on Dungeon Siege 2, the studio's staff made it their top priority to have it contain a much richer story and a deeper, more involved combat system than its predecessor. In order to achieve the former, the team tasked themselves to create more dialogue and cutscenes for the sequel's
I'm going to just listen until the end of this section. I'm not going to go into Broken World, but because this is still straddling like DS1 and DS2 and whatnot claims, I'm going to stick around for this next little bit.
Playable characters to partake in than ever before, as well as further flesh out the franchise's lore. Likewise, for the latter, the team significantly overhauled how one controlled their party's actions, making it so that when in combat, players would be forced to play a much more active role in directing them, instead of letting them go about their business with near autonomy.
Yeah, it greatly fucking reduced party control, actually. You have two modes. You have mirror mode and rampage mode. And so the game literally became, click your hotkeys when you have your fucking special ability fully charged. These special abilities you can see on the bottom. Click your hotkeys when you have them, you know, target against the boss or target against a mob if you're doing an AoE, an AoE hotkey. Oh, you know, like you gotta, you know, constantly be left clicking the next thing. Left click, left click, left click. Oh, you can't have 8 people anymore. You can only have 4 and then 6 and then 8 if you play the game multiple times and work through the difficulties. Oh, yes. This was such a good change. This is exactly what I wanted from Dungeon Siege 2. Oh my god, thank the fucking Lord. Sorry, ran over.
In addition, the team took it upon themselves to craft the sequel's environment so that they would be more open-ended and non-linear, as well as allow players to achieve greater levels of personalization when customizing one's party members through a variety of new means, such as skill trees. And, eager to capitalize on the success of the first,
we gave one example for like the customization. So there's the skill trees, there's the hotkey things that you see there. Those are different abilities that you get depending on what points you put into where on your skill trees. So like if you're focusing on ice, like, you know, ice magic, your ice storm hotkey ability will be better. Or say you're a sword and board fighter, you know, there's an ability called taunt, which makes the enemies near you focus you, but you get increased like resistances and whatnot. It's like, oh, if you put more points into like the shield skill perk in the skill tree, you'll get higher taunt values, you know, like you'll be better at taunting people with that taunt hotkey. You know, it's like that's an example of that. I think those are the specialties. I think it is literally a specialty tree. I could be wrong. But other than that, there aren't I don't think any other really unique ways that they made it so that like your character can stand out that wasn't already in Dungeon Siege 1. You know, it's just like, hey, we added skill trees and now you have a hotkey button. And oh my god, the hotkey button, I can't. I'm gonna break. And then oh my, look what they did to pets. Look at what they did.
Games
Okay.
pack mules. They also brought a host of exotic pets into its fold for players to both nurture and use on their opponents when in the heat of battle. All of these changes made for a considerable amount of work. Yet in the end, gas-powered games managed to pull through and complete Dungeon Siege 2 in a year less than it had taken the first game to come together. While this was still more time than they initially wanted to spend on the sequel, the studio staff were proud all the same of what they managed to accomplish, as were its critics. Most found that the improvements they had made...
This sort of stuff I can't comment on in regards to Dungeon Siege 2. I want to see if we get any spice in this last minute here. Let's make another spicy thing. I might pop off a little bit.
...to Dungeon Siege 2's combat and customizability had both succeeded in furthering its level of depth, as well as reducing the sense...
No, it literally didn't. It actually did not. It did, like, it at most was a sidestep in terms of depth, because now no longer can you actively control your party formation. It is literally just rampage mode or mirror mode. It's like, am I attacking everyone that I want, or are we all targeting the same person? That's literally what that is. There is no determining your formation. There is no setting character behavior. Like, you can't have more than 4 people in the first difficulty. You can't choose different difficulties to play. You have to play the base one first to unlock the next one, to play that one, which will give you more characters to have at one time. Like, we're talking about depth here, and it's just like, no, it's stripped a lot of its depth. It's simplified the party aspect of the game, and then okay, well, no, we're actually, you know, this no classless, or this classless idea, you know, we're gonna actually just like start to move back to the more common conventions of classes and like having skill trees and whatnot. And god, the art, the art of this game, oh my god. Yeah, no, it's maybe we're leaning in a little bit too much in Dungeon Siege 2 here. Maybe I'm like playing my hand a little bit too much in regards to how I feel about Dungeon Siege 2.
That one was staring at a fantastical screensaver instead of playing a game. And few disagreed that its writing, while not quite up there with the best that its genre had to offer, was nonetheless a step in the right direction when compared to what the first Dungeon Siege had offered, with its litany of main quests and side quests alike, stringing together an actual, legitimate narrative for one to consider. Instead,
oh yes, there isn't a narrative for one to consider in Dungeon Siege 1. There isn't. There is not. There is not.
Instead of just a series of events designed to shuffle one through multiple locations. Making everything even better was the fact that the player's companions now exuded personalities that were thicker than paper, and spoke colorfully among themselves while out adventuring. It still wasn't as deep or varied as some fans wanted it to be, and many found that its engine, while still allowing for some very pretty environments by the standards of its year of release, was beginning to show its age. But even
I'm just like looking at this art, and it's like, we're calling this fucking pretty. The art design of Dungeon Siege 1 being changed to this is so depressing. Like, I much prefer the art in Dungeon Siege 1 and then in Dungeon Siege 2. It actively is a step down, in my opinion. This to me just feels super generic. I guess let me specify this more. The Dungeon Siege 1 felt like a fantasy, but it felt like, when you look at the characters, they look like, oh, this is a real character that I could see living in real life. Like, there was more of a realism element to what they were trying to depict with the characters. In this, it definitely looks more of like the Dungeons and Dragons, Diablo, sort of like higher fantasy, you know, the fantastical sort of stuff. And the problem that I have with this is in Dungeon Siege 1, the fantastical elements were there, but they were sharpened by the like what you mostly saw, which was like the real world, where like, or like a more realist take on the world, where it's like you're seeing humans and like you're seeing like you know, you do see like dwarves sometimes and whatnot, but it's not all fantastical. So then when you come and approach the fantastical, when you see these sorts of things like the Chamber of Stars, or when you see the Goblin Factory, or like the Crystal Caverns and whatnot, and you get to the more fantastical areas, it's like you appreciate it more because it's just like, wow, this is like this is fantastical. Whereas in this, it's sort of it just feels like I'm playing like a high fantasy Dungeons and Dragons game, and it's just like, oh, okay, man, I guess I'm playing Diablo and big numbers flashing and all this sort of stuff, and oh my god, look at I just can't. I can't. I'm gonna lose my mind.
Amongst its harshest critics, there was little disagreement that gas-powered games had created another high-quality experience.
Okay, this is where I'm stopping. I'm not going into the DLC of DS2. We've already gone off the beaten path here as it is. I am gonna leave this video at that. That is GVMER's The Rise and Fall of Dungeon Siege. There will be a link to it in the description. And until next time.